Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Seeing Beyond and Through with Monty. I want to revisit this particular case that happened 2 years ago in 2020 because it is so relevant today. And obviously, you'll see why. The young man pictured before you is 31-year-old Texan Jonathan Price. Now, this is kind of a story that is a cautionary tale, and it's layered, but very simple. Because basically, what you have is a black man who has stated that he never had a bad encounter with the police. In fact, he had previously defended cops during the Black Lives Matter protest. And what ended up happening was that he was at a gas station, or you could say a convenience store, that sells gas. Think of one of those little gas stations that has, snacks, foods, things in which you can buy. Well, a couple got into a domestic dispute, and he decides to intervene, and the cops were called. This particular cop, Lucas, shows up there. Jonathan Price asked him a couple of times, "How are you doing?" and even extended his hand for a handshake. Lucas was not having it. Basically, the cop thought Jonathan was intoxicated. So what he did was that he told him that he would taser him, in which he did try to taser him. The taser didn't work. Jonathan walked away. Then apparently, and according to the cop, Jonathan walked towards him, which resulted in Jonathan Price being shot 4 times. Now, it says right here, pillar of the community. City worker 31 is killed by a white cop who tasered and shot him 3 times as he tried to break up a brawl inside a gas station. Now, this says 3. Some of them says 4. The autopsy report states 4 times. So you can say between 3 and 4 times. Now, what's strange about this whole thing is that before this was even done, as mentioned before, Jonathan Price praised the cops, talking about he never had a bad encounter with one, pretty much ignoring all the protests that was going on during the Black Lives Matter movement. Right here, should the black community protest for the killing of Jonathan Price? Well, that's a very individual and personal decision. Some black people chose to protest for Jonathan Price. Ironically, the very women that he did not like are the ones who showed up and protest for him. Jonathan Price stated that he preferred white women. He had a love for white women. He even went so far as to state that he had an addiction for white women. So many would say, then why don't you allow those white women that he so loved and had that addiction for to protest for him? But still, I think that we as black people, both men and women, we are forgiving to a fault. We can be very forgiving people to our own demise. Dear black people, you will not good person your way out of racism. So true. So despite his love for white women, his admiration for them, racism still is going to hit you like it did him. And for what we know about this particular case, There was no reason for the cop to shoot him 3 or 4 times. The man was unarmed. A body cam footage showed that there was no need for him to shoot him that many times. The price of ignorance is high when a black man lusts for white women goes wrong. Let me explain something to you with this here. When you say you have a love for white women, a lust for white women, an addiction for white women, admiration for white women, you're inadvertently saying that you have that for white men also. Not necessarily in a sexual way, but you have an affinity for white men. It goes the same way. When a black man puts down black women, he is inadvertently putting down black men. Black men come from black women. When black women put down black men, she is inadvertently putting down other black women because we come from each other. Is that so difficult to understand? So his love, admiration, and infinity for white women got him in the grave. A white person is not going to like you anymore. Let me repreface that by saying this. A racist white person is not going to like you anymore because you prefer their women. They're not going to like you anymore because you want to sleep with their women, or because you date their women, or marry their women, or reproduce with their women. That's not going to stop them from being racist towards you. It's not going to make the world any less racist, contrary to what you may think or believe. And a lot of times, this so-called love is love stuff, all the interracial stuff that goes on today, in my opinion, is based on self-hatred. It's not like it was 25 or 30 years ago, where you can say that couples back then probably were not so bogged down with the self-hatred of couples today, or being uncomfortable with oneself today, or wanting to reproduce biracial children. Most of the stuff today, interracially, in my opinion, is coming from a negative slant. This is the reason why it doesn't last. Black men and white women have the highest rate of divorce. That should tell you something. Something is amiss. Something is wrong. Something is not connecting. And I believe that people are doing it for the wrong reasons. When you have self-hatred in you, you marrying outwardly is not going to solve or fix your self-hatred. You try to reproduce children that don't look like you. It's almost like you're trying to eradicate part of you. That's a form of being very uncomfortable with oneself. It almost like, to me, is some form of mental illness that is going on there. But I do think that this is a cautionary tale that we can learn from. That before we start going out there loving other people, it's best to love ourselves first. And let me just tell you one thing. Again, trying to be nice to a racist is never going to work. He probably would have had a better chance, a much better chance of surviving this, had he would have looked this guy in the eye, been stern, and not been so nice. Sometimes when you're nice, people can take more of an advantage of you. Because I remember a black guy who states that he was from the 1940s and 50s, and he used to drive across town or different states in the South. And he said whenever he encountered a racist, he would look him dead in the eye. Dead in the eye. And it was not all this stuff about how are you doing? I'm going to extend a handshake to you. No, it wasn't any of that stuff. Niceness is not going to work. I'm not saying that you had to brawl with him, but you have to be very careful who you show affinity for, or who you show respect for, or who you kind of cow down to. Does not help you in a situation like this. So, unfortunately, someone's love for white people did them no good. Someone denying that racism somehow is a figment of others' imagination, that they're over exaggerating, that is just not true, it's not there. People say things like that because they can't deal with it. They want to brush it aside, they want it to go away. It's not going to go away because you want it to, or you're trying to play the nice guy. It's here. And for the time being, it's kind of here to stay, whether you can deal with it or not. You can choose the cowardly way out, denial, or you can choose the brave way out of facing it full on and acknowledging it for what it is, an evil. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is another edition of Seeing Beyond and Through with Monty, and I will see you all beyond and through.